This is Propain's new Sresh, a lively 150-160 travel trail bike, full power with Shimano's EP801 motor that's recently been updated to have Overrun and extra power in the boost mode. So in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about Propain's new Sresh. The Sresh has a burly build, with my custom bike coming in with a Fox 38 in 160mm travel, a Fox DHX2 Coil out the back with 150mm travel, Shimano's EP801 motor with 85 Nm of torque and a 626 Wh removable battery. It's got an impressive aesthetic and a chunky looking frame that Propain call Blend Carbon. It's ASM Category 5 rated, the highest possible rating for e-bikes, meaning full-on bike park use as well as everything else. I've got to say, I think aesthetically it's such a stunning looking bike. The frame's full carbon, Propain call it their Blend Carbon, and the lines on it really pronounced and straight and clean. Top tube is slung fairly low and the lines just flow into this chainstay. And the suspension linkage is really unique. These bikes from Propain stand out, and you can tell pretty much instantly from the frame silhouettes that they're Propain. They've got a strong industrial design to them. It's a full carbon bike, but the battery is just inserted just underneath. So it's got a cutout just under the down tube. I'll show you a bit later how easy it is and quick to remove that. But it's very clean looking. Everything is internally routed through the headset as well, that not everybody's a massive fan of, but personally doesn't really detract me too much from buying bikes with internally routed cable headsets. Now there's a few different specifications that Propain sell, but their online site has loads of different options, so you can pretty much customize the entire bike from the shock, wheel set. All the components are customizable, which I like a lot. I went for a Fox 38 in 160 and the Coil. And I do think, again, aesthetics, they really do work on this bike. That orange and kind of baby blue paint scheme go really well. So 160 fork, pretty stiff. And I wanted to try it with a Coil. I'm a big fan of Coil on e-bikes. I think the suppleness and sensitivity that you get from a Coil is virtually impossible to get with air. It's so quick and easy to break away. Hardly any force is required there at all. And even though it's only 150 travel at the rear, with this configuration, I think it's kind of like a mini enduro bike. It's burly enough with the 38 and a Coil, mullet, these Schwalbe tyres. I think it can be really capable in this specification here. I hit some of my local fast, steep trail tracks, which are loose, rooty, and a perfect test bed for this type of bike. I really appreciate the shorter travel bike, but still with a proper enduro build. There's no light duty components here. It's built to take a beating. Lots of Burly built e-bikes often come with longer travel, which can make them feel a bit more lethargic on trails. This bike feels direct and sharp, more agile, but in no way outgunned. It's got a stiff chassis and excellent suspension. So the bike is a very stiff platform, I found, and actually I find the rear quite progressive. It's really eager to spring back, and I've dialed the rebound in, I've played around with the suspension settings. It's quite difficult to use all of the travel, so it's more of a bike that likes to kind of skip over the travel, feels like it wants to kind of get chucked around a little bit. And the mullet out the rear kind of kicks in, the rear wants to slide around the corners quite eagerly, which I really like, but I found the suspension a little bit difficult to use all of the travel. It does feel very stiff, which is not a bad thing. It's just a characteristic trait to this frame. It's massive chunky layup, kind of oversized chainstays and this really unique looking rear linkage, I think all contribute to that. The fork out the front feels super stable. The stack height's a little bit low for me, even with these 30mm rise bars. I'd consider running a 40 or even a 50 out the front, but yeah, it's the type of bike that I wouldn't say is a just send it and plow over the rocks and the chunder. It's a bike that likes to kind of skip around a little bit and use some of that energy from the terrain to pop and jump and shroud and move around. So if you're an active type of rider that likes a lively feeling bike, this is very, very lively.
If you like steep trails, techie enduro tracks, and even a bit of downhill, this is the type of bike that can handle it. But at the same time, it's not just a docile sled. It's a well-sorted trail bike that can stay active and agile, but can also handle the most rowdy of trails. I didn't feel the suspension quite as plush as I'd imagine it might be. The rear progression ramps up quite quickly, meaning that it's not quite as plush throughout the travel compared to some others in the same travel range. On the flip side, it's what keeps the bike feeling more lively.
So although the bike looks lovely and aesthetically pleasing, I don't find the Shimano stuff, I don't know, there's just something about it that still feels a little bit old school. This screen bolted on, it's got a massive bezel around it and it just looks a little bit not completely up to date like some of the other systems that are out there on the market. Still frustratingly doesn't give a battery percentage, it's just giving me bars, so if I want to work out what my percentage is left, I just have to count these very small bars on there, which is a bit frustrating. I don't know why they just don't change that. And I do find this controller here a little bit fiddly and not quite that tactile to use, especially with gloves. They've got these quite small buttons on them, and the screen has a couple of cables going into it. They're very small and delicate. And actually, there's been a couple of times when I've tried to turn the bike on and it won't go on because these cables have come out of the little remote, or the little screen, I should say. So you can just probably see those under there. It's not a huge biggie at all, but it's just something I notice, and I think we are paying quite a lot of money for the e-bikes, and I'd like everything to be perfect. Of course, nothing is always perfect. There's always small things to pick up on. I'd just like to see some of these fiddly electronics refined a little bit more. Maybe Shimano one day can have some kind of integrated top tube display like we're seeing on some of the other e-bikes out there. Just feels a little bit bolt on and a little bit kind of haphazardly put on there. And I just don't understand why we don't have a percentage bar on this screen. It's little things that sometimes are a little bit irritating, but I feel should be called out. Other than that, the drivetrain is SRAM's wireless T-type transmission, and I find it very ergonomic actually to use. But I have to highlight how close on a mullet the transmission rear cage gets to the floor. Certainly on this bike I've had no issues, but on other mullet bikes I do find that we are getting quite close to the floor, and these can bend, these cages here, and they are not the cheapest to replace. If they do bend, it just means that the shifting performance is a little bit compromised. It doesn't completely end the shifting, but I found that in some of the gears it can cause some alignment issues, and it's more prevalent on a mullet bike. They're a little bit more susceptible to getting like rock strikes and root strikes because it's a little bit lower to the ground.
The Shimano EP801 motor, with the recent updates that I'll cover in a moment, has some important improvements. It's got 85 Nm of torque with 600 watts of peak power. This example had a small amount of noise on the climbs, and like most Shimano EP801 motors, it's got a little rattle on descents. Lots of people don't get bothered by this at all, but it is there in the background.
So the Shimano update has been quite a significant update actually. It now requires less rider power, less rider leg power in boost to get the most out of the motor. And I've noticed on some of the like steep technical climbs that really does help. And the most critical thing is it's now got Overrun. So it's got 3 settings on Overrun, low, mid or high. And that dictates how much the motor gives you after you've stopped pedaling. So after you've put a crank and you stop momentarily to clear like a route or an obstacle, a rock or something, the motor will carry on propelling you forward. And that represents a real significant update to the Shimano EP801 system. Now on this super steep uphill section, I no longer need to use so much body force and momentum to get the bike to get up the trail. I can rely a little bit more on the motor to carry on propelling the bike forward, and I can still use that body momentum to clear over the routes on the steep stuff. And this has got a 450mm chainstay with this mullet setup here, so it's not super short, and I do find in the larger sizes that additional length at the back really does help with the balance. I don't find the front tipping up so much or getting really light. I did momentarily on this steep climb here, but it wasn't so much that I had to bail out. And paired with this Big Betty tyre on the rear, which has this really aggressive tread profile on it, got tons of grip, loads of momentum, and the Shimano EP801 with its update, yeah, it's a really, really decent update and a strong proposition to compete with the most powerful motors that are out on the market right now. So as a climber, it's pretty competent. I would potentially like a steeper seat tube angle. I've got the saddle as far forward on the rails as it goes. It's just on the edge. I'd like to see it a little bit steeper, but I've been impressed with certainly from the update from the Shimano motor. Now the weights of these bikes are really impressive. The lightest version is 20.8 kilos. That's for a full power Shimano EP801 bike with the 85 Nm motor and a 630 Wh removable battery. Now 20.8 kilos is remarkably light, I think, for a full power bike. Now this one's heavier because I'm in XL size. I've got a Coil, beefier tyres, a Fox 38, a bigger dropper. But it still comes in at just under 23 kilos, which I think for a bike that's basically a mini enduro bike, 150, 160, is a very respectable weight, especially considering it's got a removable battery. Sometimes brands fix the batteries in to save weight, but that means obviously you can't take it out easily. This is just a 4mm Allen key, and it just releases the latch and the battery pops out. I'll show you how quick and easy it is. It's a 4mm key, and here's a single twist on that, and then just a little latch. Like the easiest battery to remove, I think, maybe of any bike I've changed. There's no keys or no annoying little things that you're going to lose. Just a 4mm Allen key that, you know, most of us have got it in our pocket or on our bike. And that is the 630 Wh battery. It's a third-party battery, so it's not a Shimano one. It's made by Darth on this one. And it's a fairly decent energy density for the size. It's got a carbon plate on the bottom, and it's super easy to pop back in just out on the trail. Yeah, 20 seconds to take it out, and same again to pop it back in. Very neat.
The Propain Sresh is a well-sorted, tough, well-specced and hard-hitting trail bike, even though its geometry is more trail-orientated, like its 65-degree head angle, but it doesn't seem to hold it back on rougher terrain at all. Propain offer pretty decent value and a wide variety of price ranges and build kits. They've also got one of the industry's best online configurators to fully customize your bike, so it's well worth checking out over at propainbicycles.com.